An Age of Kings is a 15-part serial adaptation of the 8 sequential history plays of William Shakespeare, Richard II, 1 Henry IV, 2 Henry IV, Henry V, 1 Henry VI, 2 Henry VI, 3 Henry VI and Richard III, provided by the BBC in 1960. At the time, the show was the most ambitious Shakespearean television adaptation ever made, and was a critical and commercial success in both the UK and North America. Introduction. The concept for the series originated in 1959 with Peter Dews, a veteran BBC producer and director, who was inspired by a 1951 Anthony Quayle-directed production of The Henriette at the Theatre Royal, and a 1953 Douglas Seale-directed repertory cast production of the 3 parts of Henry VI at the Birmingham Repertory Theatre and subsequently, the Old Vic. Dews sourced most of his cast from the Old Vic, using many of the same actors who had appeared in Seale's production, although in different roles. Paul Daneman, for example, played Henry VI for Seale, but played Richard III in Age of Kings. Dews also used actors with whom he had worked whilst directing undergraduate plays at Oxford University. He gave the job of directing to his assistant, Michael Hayes. Many of the episodes ended with wordless pseudo-teasers for the following episode. For example, the deposing of the king ends with a shot of Northumberland's dagger stabbed into Henry IV's paperwork, visually alluding to his later rebellion. Signs of War ends with a shot of a signpost reading Agincourt, alluding to the upcoming battle in the following episode. The Sun in Splendor ends with George, Duke of Clarence, almost falling into a vat of wine, only to be saved by his brother, Richard, who looks deviously at the camera and smiles, alluding to his subsequent murder. The Dangerous Brother ends with Richard watching the sleeping princess in the tower before smiling to himself and then blowing out a candle, again alluding to his planned murder. Head of BBC drama Michael Berry referred to these teasers by explaining that a strengthened purpose is added to the narrative when it is wholly seen, and we are able to look forward to what happens next. Quote, "The series was a huge success, with an average viewing audience of 3 million in the UK. The Times hailed the production as monumental, a landmark in the BBC's Shakespearean tradition." Quote, United States airing. The series was acquired for United States Public Television by the National Educational Television and Radio Center, NETRC, with financial support from the Humble Oil and Refining Company. The show was the first nationally distributed non-commercial series to receive support from a commercial source. The episodes: Richard II, The Hollow Crown. Sean Connery and Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie. Connery was a relatively unknown actor when he was cast as Henry Hotspur Percy in An Age of Kings. Content: Richard II Acts Chapter 1, 2 and Act 3, Scenes 1 and 2, up to Richard conceding defeat despite the protests of Carlyle, Scrope and Almirall. Richard II, The Deposing of a King. Julian Glover in 2011. Like many actors, Glover played multiple characters across the entire series, appearing in all but one episode. Content: Richard II from Act 3, Scene 3 onwards, beginning with York chiding Northumberland for not referring to Richard as king. Henry IV, Rebellion from the North. Henry IV, The Road to Shrewsbury. Content: 1 Henry IV from Act 3, Scene 1 onwards, beginning with the strategy meeting between Hotspur, Mortimer and Glendower. Henry IV, The New Conspiracy. Henry IV, Uneasy Lies the Head. Content: 2 Henry IV from Act 3, Scene 1 onwards, beginning with Henry IV recalling Richard II's prediction of civil war. Henry V, Signs of War. Judi Dench was already a well-known Shakespearean performer when she was cast as Catherine of Valois. Content: Henry V Acts Chapter 1, 2 and 3. Up to the French yearning for what they feel will be an easy victory at Agincourt. Henry V, the Band of Brothers. Content: Henry V from Act 4, Scene 0 onwards, beginning with the chorus describing Henry's undercover surveillance of his camp. Henry VI, the Red Rose and the White. Alterations. As this is the only episode in the series which adapts an entire play, truncation is much more liberal here than elsewhere. The most obvious difference is the complete removal of Talbot, the ostensible protagonist of the play. The characters of Burgundy and Edmund Mortimer have also been removed, and dialogue is heavily cut from every scene. All of the battle scenes from France have also been removed, and the episode concentrates almost entirely on the political disintegration in England. Henry VI, the Fall of a Protector. Content: To Henry VI Acts Chapter 1, 2 and Act 3, Scene 1. Up to York's soliloquy regarding the fact that he now has troops at his disposal and his revelation of his plans to use Jack Cade to instigate a popular rebellion. Alterations. Peter Thump does not kill Thomas Horner during the combat. He compels him to confess by sitting on him, and Horner is promptly arrested. Henry VI, the Rabble from Kent. Patrick Garland in 1969. Having played the important role of Henry V's brother John, Duke of Bedford in the early episodes, Garland played the equally important role of Richard III's brother George, Duke of Clarence in later episodes. Content: To Henry VI from Act 3, Scene 2 onwards, beginning with the murder of the Duke of Gloucester. Alterations. The murder of Gloucester is shown, whereas in the text, it happens off-stage. The characters of both George Plantagenet and Edmund Plantagenet are introduced just prior to the First Battle of St. Albans, whereas in the text, neither character is introduced until 3 Henry VI. Additionally, Edmund is played by an adult actor, whereas in the text, he is a child. Buckingham is killed on screen. In the text, his fate remains unknown until the opening lines of 3 Henry VI, where it is revealed he was killed by Edward. Henry VI, The Morning's War. Content: 3 Henry VI Acts Chapter 1, 2 and Act 3, Scenes 1 and 2. Up to Richard's soliloquy wherein he vows to attain the crown. Alterations. The character of Edmund, Earl of Rutland, is played by an adult actor, whereas in the text, he is a child. Additionally, Margaret is present during his murder, and we see her wipe his blood on the handkerchief which she later gives to York. In the text, Margaret does not witness the murder. During the Battle of Towton, Richard fights and kills Clifford, whereas in the text, they fight, but Clifford flees and is mortally wounded off-stage when hit by an arrow. Henry VI, The Sun and Splendor. Content: 3 Henry VI from Act 3, Scene 3 onwards, beginning with Margaret's visit to Louis XI of France. Alterations. Edward is rescued from his imprisonment by Richard and Lord Stafford, whereas in the play, he is rescued by Richard, Lord Hastings and Lord Stanley. Warwick is killed during the Battle of Barnet by George, whereas in the text, he is carried onto stage mortally wounded by Edward. Also, the end of the episode differs slightly from the end of the play, after Edward expresses his wish that all conflict has ceased. A large celebration ensues. As the credits roll, Richard and George stand to one side, and George almost slips into a barrel of wine, only to be saved by Richard. As George walks away, Richard muses silently to himself and then smiles deviously at the camera. Richard III, The Dangerous Brother. Content: Richard III Acts Chapter 1, 2 and Act 3, Scene 1. up to Richard promising Buckingham the dukedom of Hereford. Alterations. The character of Lord Grey is not portrayed as Queen Elizabeth's son, but simply as a kinsman. Only Dorset is her son. In the text, although there is some confusion and overlapping regarding the two characters in the early scenes, in the latter half of the play, they are both depicted as her sons. As the closing credits roll, there is a scene of Richard watching the princes sleeping. There is no such scene in the text. Richard III, the Boar Hunt. Richard III was portrayed in An Age of Kings by Paul Daneman. In a 1953 production of the tetralogy at the Birmingham Repertory Theatre directed by Douglas Seal, Daneman had played one of Richard's royal predecessors, Henry V. Content: Richard III from Act 3, Scene 1 onwards, beginning with Stanley's messenger arriving at Hastings House. Alterations. The Scrivener's lamentation regarding the illegality of Hastings' execution is presented in the form of a plea as he attempts to convince two citizens to join him and speak out against Richard's actions. In the text, his speech is delivered as a soliloquy. The two priests between whom Richard stands as the Lord Mayor urges him to become king are not real priests, but two servants dressed up as priests. As Richard ascends to the throne for the first time, he stumbles, and has Buckingham help him into the chair. There is no such scene in the play, as in most filmed versions at this point, such as the 1912 The Life and Death of King Richard III and Laurence Olivier's 1955 Richard III. The ghosts appear only to Richard, whereas in the text they appear to both Richard and Richmond.